Running Open LLMs on Mac, Linux, and Windows. A large language model, or LLM, is an AI language model that uses deep learning techniques and massive data sets to achieve general-purpose language understanding and generation. Open LLMs are free to use and can be close to the performance of a proprietary LLM, such as OpenAI's ChatGPT or Google's Bard. Why not? You get to tinker with cutting-edge technology in an unmonitored and unfettered way. You don't need an internet connection or sign in to anything to use these. They run locally on your hardware, so your queries and responses are not being limited or scrutinized. You can now easily try different models and compare their performance and responses. In this video, I'll show you two straightforward ways to launch and use various models or weights of LLM, which are available primarily from the very wonderful Hugging Face website. That's huggingface.co, not huggingface.com. That's a different thing. Links in the video description below. Bear in mind too that these apps are very recent and are being updated regularly, so they may look and act a little differently from what I show here if you happen to view this a few months later. These methods should all work on Mac, Linux, or Windows computers or laptops if you have enough RAM. Almost all require a minimum of 8 GB of RAM. Some will require more. Many will work much more quickly if you have a recent NVIDIA graphics card or GPU. That said, I can run many of these quite adequately on my nothing special AMD Ryzen 5 laptop. Essentially, you require a model, typically a several gigabyte file containing the compressed version of a specific LLM, and some kind of software to launch and interact with the model. Note that the models all run locally with these methods. There is no internet connectivity. The LLMs only know stuff up till the time they were created, similar to current versions of ChatGPT and others. The models we are interested in are listed on Hugging Face, as previously mentioned, and are files with a GGUF extension, and will often show how much system RAM you must have to run them. Models with a 7B in the name have 7 billion parameters and will usually run in 8 gigs of RAM. Models with 13B have, you guessed it, 13 billion parameters and will generally need at least 16 gigabytes of system RAM to work. As far as video, the more VRAM the better. A recent gaming GPU should speed things up nicely. My Windows PC has an older NVIDIA 1660 Super with 6 gigs of VRAM and sadly doesn't add much performance at all. There are two main ways to use these LLMs. One is using a Llama file, which is an open source initiative that allows users to turn large language model LLM weights into an executable that is self-contained and cross-platform. The second is to use an LLM weight in conjunction with a launcher, such as Jan or LM Studio. I'm going to use Jan in this video, but those two work in a similar way. I just found Jan to be a little more seamless to work with. I did a video a month or so ago on Llama file, linked below in the video description. But basically, you download a Llama file of your choice, make it executable, and run it. It will launch a local browser instance with a GUI to allow you to interact with the LLM. For Linux, there is nothing else you need to do. For Apple Silicon Macs, you may also need to install Xcode from the App Store, but otherwise the process is very similar to Linux. For Windows, it's essentially the same, but with a caveat. Windows does not usually allow you to run an executable file larger than 4 gigabytes, and most of these will be over that size. What to do? Well, what I did was to download one of the slightly smaller Llama files, then rename it with a .exe extension to make it executable as previously described. For example, the Phi2 Llama file is less than 2 gigabytes in size. So download that file and rename it to Phi2 lamafile.exe. Now you could simply run and use that file even though such small files are typically not terribly useful. However, you can also use it to run other larger, more useful .gguf files. Using the -M switch does this. So, for example, from a command line in Windows, simply type this. When you press enter, the llama file will actually run the second file, that is the gguf file, even if it is larger than 4 GB in size. This method is useful for Linux and Mac too, since not all LLMs will have a llama file version, but most will have a gguf version available. Cool! The Jan launcher is used as a front end in working with these gguf files. Links in the video description below to both Jan and to LM Studio. Download the app, install and launch. The GUI offers a curated list of models to download and try. The chat interface looks similar to that of ChatGPT, as you can see. There are brief descriptions of the models, and you can download the models from within the GUI. LM Studio was a little more helpful here, clearly indicating how much system RAM would be required for each model. Jan does seem more intuitive to me as far as downloading and using a particular model though. Jan will also allow you to use ChatGPT models if you have a valid API. I believe you do need a paid subscription to ChatGPT to have access to the API though. The progress in this space is pretty wild. Open and closed source LLMs are being produced at an impressive rate. This sort of stuff tickles the computer hobbyist in me, and I hope some of you may take time to try using llama files or a launcher like Jan to play with your own local instance of one of these large language models. It's quite interesting. Hey, thanks again for watching, and as I mentioned before, please check out the links below. See you next time.